Hey babes, welcome or welcome back to and everything in between. I'm Victoria, your host and guide for navigating the beautiful chaos of your 20s. Whether you're building your dream career, figuring out relationships, or just trying to find you, this is your space for self-growth, real talk, and a little fun along the way. Let's dive into it and everything in between. In today's episode, we're diving into a topic that many women, including myself, deal with when we accomplish goals that we set for ourselves or get hired for jobs that we know we're qualified for. And that is imposter syndrome. First, let's get into what imposter syndrome actually is. Quote unquote imposter phenomenon was first coined by psychologists Pauline Rode Clance and Suzanne Imes in 1978 to deal with the internal experience of doubting your abilities. In a more casual sense, it's defined as the feeling of being an imposter in an environment where you don't feel like you necessarily belong for one reason or another. This can look like getting promoted to a higher level role due to your experience and the value that others see in you, but not feeling like you deserve it for whatever reason. I felt like an imposter many times in my life, especially being a Black woman working and going to school in predominantly white spaces. I've questioned many times whether or not I'm a token and if other people really see the value that I have to add to a given organization or environment. I have worked so hard to be where I am today, and my stats and accomplishments and experiences speak for themselves. I'm going to share a few examples of imposter syndrome that I've dealt with that may help you to identify if you've experienced a similar feeling. And if you hear any of these examples and think of a friend or family member who may have dealt with a similar experience, be sure to share this episode with them so that they can get helpful tips and feel validated in what they've felt before. So, number one, getting a job in fashion. I landed a marketing role after having at least two internships at a time in college and felt very qualified on paper. But once I started, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. Why? I really think that it was because everyone around me was very educated in the world of fashion. They either went to FIT or they went to Parsons in New York City. And I didn't study fashion. I didn't know a lot about the fashion industry itself. So when I would engage with the people that I was working with, it felt like I didn't belong there. Looking back, I realize how hard I worked to earn that spot. But at that time, my mind kept questioning my worth. Another example, seeing a therapist in college. So while this was absolutely necessary for me, and I'm so glad that I did end up seeing a therapist when I did not think that I needed therapy at that time. I did not want to talk to anyone about my struggles or grievances. One, because I thought I could deal with them on my own. And two, because I really didn't want a stranger in my business and to judge me for feeling the way that I felt and expressing that to them. And lastly, because I just didn't think I was qualified enough to even need to see a therapist. But lo and behold, I really don't think I would have made it through my sophomore year of college without it. And in my opinion, it's more honorable to your present and future self to be able to identify a pattern and determine the ways in which you can resolve it. Strength isn't about doing it alone, which is beyond okay. Asking for help will only allow you to take steps towards healing, so that you can gradually move towards a life that you love to live. We all need help. We're human beings. And I'm really grateful to my past self at the time for recognizing that and accepting that. And the last example, number three, when I was looking for apartments in New York City, I felt like I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. No one I knew at the time was living in New York City, and I didn't really have anyone to turn to except for my friends who were looking for apartments at the same time, or real estate agents who honestly only had the best interests of themselves and their broker fees. So I went into the process thinking I would have my own apartment, that I would live in prime Manhattan with floor to ceiling windows, 360 views, with a 15-minute commute to my job and every single amenity that I could imagine at my fingertips. And that just wasn't the case in reality. When I took my first steps towards searching for an apartment, I came to find that every single apartment, just in general, was above my pay grade. Number one bedrooms would not be an option for me. And if there was something I could afford, it would be at least an hour and 30 minutes away from my job, which is what I was trying to get away from living in New Jersey. So, in the end, I did end up finding an incredible apartment in Queens with a beautiful rooftop, a gym, lounges, a laundry in building, which honestly was more essential than I had thought about in the beginning, and everything I wanted, but I was so worried. There was a subconscious feeling that I didn't belong there, but I had been at my job for a few months. I had saved some money. I worked hard, budgeted, and made it happen. So why doubt myself? So these are the feelings that typically come along when people experience imposter syndrome. Anyone can feel like an imposter. According to the American Psychological Association, roughly 82% of the population has experienced feelings of imposter syndrome. It's not limited to any one person, culture, race, or ethnicity. And as you can hear from my examples, it can affect anyone in any area of their life, regardless of their expertise, skill level, or how much money they have. It doesn't matter. Incredibly successful people like Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris have shared that they have struggled with feeling like an imposter at some point in their careers. Viola Davis shared her experiences with imposter syndrome despite her incredible accomplishments as an actress. She overcame imposter syndrome by recognizing her hard work and understanding the systemic challenges that contributed to the feelings of being an imposter. So, why does it even come about? Well, there are many systemic factors leading to people, women, and minorities in particular, that contribute to this feeling or belief. In the workplace, especially male dominated workplaces, it can be difficult to look around you and see one or two other women working in your office, which may lead to the why me line of thinking and questioning. It is important to note that imposter syndrome is not a medical diagnosis, and there is nothing wrong with you if you have experienced or are experiencing self doubt or the feelings of imposter syndrome. If you are dealing with this, how can you manage these feelings? First of all, girl, remember who you are. When you forget, remind yourself of your incredible accomplishments and what you have achieved. You were hired because you were the best person for the position. You got the apartment because you can afford it. When you find yourself going down a negative internal feedback loop, pause and take a second to remember who you are. Something that helps with this is creating a list of your accomplishments in your notes or somewhere where you can quickly reference it when you're feeling self doubt. Or keep an album of images that make you happy so that you can go back to it when you're feeling self doubt. For example, in your Notes app, title the note My Wins or My Accomplishments and start small so it's easier. But think about your accomplishments in the last month, the last year, the last 5 years. Did you sign a new lease? Did you have a gallery showing of your artwork? Did you travel to a new place? These are all wins. Take a moment now to think about your biggest win this week and write it down. And one thing to keep in mind is that you should not compare yourself to others. We all know this, but we all need this reminder. There are so many people who are where they are for reasons that are completely irrelevant to you. Focus on who you are and the wins that have allowed you to be where you are today. Here are a few additional tips for dealing with imposter syndrome. Number one, talk to someone. I guarantee with almost 100% certainty that you are not the only one you know who has felt the way that you may be feeling. Talk to someone in your field or a friend that you trust who can hopefully share how they were able to overcome feeling like an imposter. Number two, talk to yourself. Sometimes, once you notice that you're on a negative spiral, only you can talk yourself down. Practice affirmations such as, I am good enough, I am qualified for this position, and more. I am a positive contributor to this organization. Number three, celebrate your wins. Remember that album I told you to make? Turn to this whenever you're feeling self doubt. I'm a very visual person, so for me, it definitely helps to see pictures of myself on stage or on the first day of my job to remind myself that I have done incredible things. Oprah Winfrey famously keeps a gratitude journal to reflect on her wins, both big and small, as a reminder of her journey, and you can easily do this too. Number four, normalize your feelings. While we do not want to normalize imposter syndrome because it obviously sucks and no one should have to deal with feeling this way, it's important to remember that your feelings are your feelings. It's normal to feel anxious when you're starting something new or for your brain to question your qualifications right before you're about to go into an interview. So don't judge yourself when these feelings come up. Acknowledge them and use the tips identified in the earlier parts of this episode to help you manage those feelings. Will imposter syndrome ever go away? I'd like to think that it can. But again, this phenomenon affects different people in different ways based on their belief system and their environments. If we can do something to balance gender and race equality across all industries, across the United States, and across the globe, and give people the resources that they need to succeed, I think it can definitely help. On an individual level, it starts with recognizing your worth and helping others to see theirs too. Surround yourself with people who lift you up and challenge spaces that make you feel less than. I think it can help. I think it can definitely help with these feelings. Do we have a long way to go as a society in order to get there? Yes, absolutely. But it can start on an individual level today. And by helping yourself, by learning how to manage imposter syndrome, you can help others too. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this episode resonated with you or would be helpful for someone you know, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube and share it with a friend. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at and.everything.inbetween for updates, and you can find me on Instagram at victoria.liverpool. This podcast is sound designed and edited by Misty Avenger. Music for this podcast is The Dude by Matt Large, courtesy of Epidemic Sound. Details provided in the description. Remember, episodes drop weekly on Sundays at 7 p.m. Until then, keep growing, glowing, and remember, you got this.